basically just said everything, but without further ado, I would like to introduce the 4-1 favourite for Conservative Party leadership, MP for North East Somerset, Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you very much for inviting me for that kind introduction. There was a comment in today's Daily Mail that said my 6th child and 5th son had as much chance of becoming Prime Minister as I do, and I think that's probably about right, and I wouldn't get out of bookmakers if I were you. But it's a real pleasure to be here at such a well-organised event, and I'd like to thank the Student Union and the newly formed Conservative Association for inviting me and allowing me to come and discuss the issues of the day with you. And that's really where I wanted to start, because there is this question about freedom of speech at universities and what has been going on, and some efforts to close down freedom of speech, and accusations that you're a snowflake generation. I say you don't look like snowflakes to me, but then there are a large number of you and only one of me, so I'm not going to start off by insulting a highly intellectual, sophisticated audience. People are going to be the leaders of our country in the next generation. I don't think that's a good approach to coming to universities. But I think it is important to remember that you are going to be the leaders of the country in the next generation. Bath's reputation as a university is a fine reputation, and being here puts you in pole position to go on to careers that will determine the future of our country. So it's an honour for me to be speaking to people who are going to have those crucially important positions in years to come. But freedom of speech. I want to discuss, first of all, why freedom of speech is important, what the consequences of not having freedom of speech are, and what, if any, the limits on freedom of speech ought to be. So first of all, why is freedom of speech important? Something, in a way, we all take for granted. That we look to the Second Amendment in the United States, we look to the Bill of Rights in the United Kingdom, or England strictly when it was passed, England and Wales, that preserves and defends freedom of speech. And perhaps because we're so used to it, perhaps because it's been part of our national story for so long, we don't often bother thinking about why it matters. Why is it important, and why should it be as free as possible? And I will come on to the constraints that you may want to have later. Well, the reason is it is absolutely essential to the constitutional settlement that we have, which I happen to think is a very good way of being governed. Indeed, it's as good a way of being governed as anybody has ever managed to find. And the freedom of speech is one of the core pillars with the other parts of our constitutional settlement. The next one is, of course, democracy. So how do democracy and freedom of speech tie in together? Well, I think in 2 ways. First of all, you need to discuss the ideas that you will be governed by. You need to work out which policies will be good and which ones will be bad. But how do you do that if you don't have freedom of speech? See, I actually recognise that not every idea I have or the Conservative Party has will be brilliant. We will have some dud ideas. And it is very important that those ideas are discussed and debated so that they don't get put into effect. One of the criticisms of the Conservative Party manifesto in 2017 was that it had all been put together in secret so that nobody knew what was going to be in it. And that meant there were some ideas in it that weren't any good and weren't very popular. So freedom of speech is actually good for people who want to get things done and want to get things done in the way they like, because it can tease out the problems, the issues, the mistakes, and can lead to better decisions being made through the crucible of debate. And we can all learn from that, regardless of our political persuasion, because no political party, no political philosophy has a monopoly of knowledge or an infallibility in the policy it will create. But it's more important than that, because actually you cannot have democracy without freedom of speech. Why do I say that? Well, if the other argument isn't put, how do you know what alternative there is to vote for? If the press is censored by the government of the day, how do you know that the government of the day isn't getting everything right? Where do the criticisms come from? Where does the news come from that shows what is going on is bad or corrupt or dishonest or just failing? It doesn't. So democracy absolutely depends on freedom of speech. Without it, to have democracy and not freedom of speech would almost automatically become a one-party state, because that one-party state would be in control of the news agenda, and therefore would make it impossible for its opponents to get its leaflets printed, let alone get news outlets to put information across that was contrary to what the party of government wanted to hear. When coups took place, with more frequency than they do today, the first thing that always used to happen was that the generals would take charge of the radio station and the broadcasting points. And that was for a very good reason. The best way to stop democracy is to stop freedom of speech, because then people don't know what they're complaining about. If you don't believe me, read books on North Korea, because the fascinating thing about North Korea is how the propaganda in North Korea persuades people that it is the perfect society. And amazing things. Obviously dissidents have escaped, but I read one of these books. And during one of the famines, broadly self-inflicted famines in North Korea, the Americans sent some food aid. And it appeared in bags that said US government on it. You know what the propaganda from North Korea was? It was to say we've won a great victory against the Americans and therefore we have conquered their food, and that's why we've got some food in American bags. And that perhaps trivializes something very important and very sad about North Korea. But I hope it illustrates the point that you cannot have democracy without freedom of speech. But you can't have the rule of law either. Why can you not have the rule of law? Well, the rule of law again depends on wrongdoing being exposed and corruption being revealed, and that freedom of speech allows news to get out about what has been going on. If you take the Jimmy Savile case, the Jimmy Savile case was closed down when Jimmy Savile was alive because of the libel laws, because of his ability to threaten to sue and to sue to prevent investigation by the newspapers of what he was doing. So the argument there is actually the rule of law, you need more freedom of speech, because it is through that that you expose wrongdoing. But you also ensure that justice is not only done, but is seen to be done. And that's a very important part of the rule of law. We have to know that our judicial system comes to conclusions that we as a nation broadly think are right. We don't want to have a system where the judges are in a complete vacuum, able to do whatever they want, and nobody can ever look at it or examine it. Because the judges are there to implement the law that is passed by Parliament, not to be the law. The rule of law requires that everybody is under the law, including judges. And that's an important point, and therefore their decisions need to be discussed and debated. Now, I think this should be done in civilised tones, but if a judge gives a sentence that is thought to be too light or too harsh, that is something that we as a nation can discuss to decide whether Parliament ought to change the sentencing guidelines for those offences. If you don't have that, if you have the rule of law in a vacuum, you don't know what has actually happened, and you have no ability to change it. And we have law by consent in this country. But it's also to safeguard us from corruption, because the state gives huge power to those who enforce, implement, and judge the law. They can deprive us of our liberty, lock us up in prison overnight or for life. And because of that, great trust is put in them. Trust that they will be above venal human nature. But that needs to be checked. We put that trust in them, but then we check it. What is the best way to expose corruption? It is through a free press. And one of the reasons the United Kingdom is one of the least corrupt countries in the world is because we have a vigorous and free press. And if you think, well, we're just a wonderful nation, which we do, and therefore by our very innate nature we won't be corrupt. Sorry to say, that's not true. Thomas More, you remember in The Man for All Seasons, is given a bribe which he throws into the Thames because he won't take a bribe. That's because judges were bribed. Judges have been removed from office for taking bribes in the past. And the reason they are free from corruption, or as free from corruption as they are, is because of the freedom of the press. So, free speech leads to our constitutional settlement supports democracy, and it supports the rule of law. But this is a relationship that works together, because actually democracy also supports the freedom of the press. The reason for that is that if you didn't have a democracy, you would very easily have a government that didn't like the freedom of the press and would be able to get rid of it. And likewise, the rule of law protects the freedom of the press because it means it's legal to say these things and you can't be unreasonably punished. And what is one of the greatest protectors of freedom of the press, and this has been changed in recent years, to my mind, a great mistake, one of the great protectors is jury trial. Because juries would not convict when governments brought oppressive charges. You certainly saw that in the 18th and early 19th century, when juries simply would not proceed against people who had used their freedom, their innate liberty, to say things governments didn't like. So law, democracy, press, all come together to create our constitutional settlement. And yes, of course it's not perfect, but it's as good a system as any other country has ever been able to find. That's why the United States has it, that's why most successful nations have a form of our democracy, or similar democracy. I'm not claiming it all comes from us, but a similar form of democracy to us, because it actually creates a better, stronger, more prosperous society. If you take out the freedom of speech from that, then you find that the other two pillars will fall down. So that in a way is easy to canter through why the freedom of the press is important. But I said I would look at the question of where should freedom of the press be limited? Should it be limited if the press is wrong, if the press makes a mistake? Does freedom of speech require that everything everybody says is correct? Go to a poll, actually. Let's have some audience participation. Who thinks that freedom of speech should be constrained if what is going to be said is wrong? Have show of hands, please. Okay. A smattering, reasonable smattering, think that, and who doesn't think that? Most don't think that. And I'm on your side, it won't surprise you to know. And I'll explain why. The reason the press should be free, even if it's wrong, is partly because there's no monopoly on being right. Lots of things that we know from history people believed have turned out to be false. To give you an example, if it had been impossible to say things that you didn't know were true, well, in the 19th century, everybody believed that cholera was passed by a miasma. The air was dirty and heavy with germs, and the air was certainly dirty because of all the smoke and so on, and the power stations in cities in the early days of electricity, but the smoke from coal fires. But they were wrong. And so you always have to bear in mind the ability of science to think things that turn out later to be wrong. Would Darwin's works have been published in the atmosphere of the later 19th century if there was an expectation you had to be right? See, they wouldn't have thought he was right. They thought he was wrong. People burned his books. They were so cross about what he was saying. And now we think exactly the opposite. And that's very important, that society changes its view of what is right and wrong, partly because newspapers and journals and television have come up with stories that aren't actually seen to be true at the time. And who is to judge? Who is to say this story is wrong and therefore it mustn't be published, and this one's right and therefore it must be? But let me take a more immediate example. There's been lots of stories in the press about Jeremy Corbyn and the Czech Republic, and whether or not he was known to the Czech secret services. To be very honest, I don't know. And I don't like to cast aspersions at people. My general view of politicians, of all parties, is that they honestly seek what is in the best interest of the nation, even if I disagree with them. I disagree with them does not have anything to do with their motivation or whether they are good or bad people. It is frankly completely irrelevant. It's interesting to me and that's my immediate family, but not to anybody else. So I don't want to just assume that because he is a Labour Party leader, he must be in the pay of the Soviets. I think that is a silly thing to think. So the question is, If it turns out to be wrong, were the newspapers legitimate in printing it? And I think the answer is unquestionably yes, they were, because it is important for the public to know this question has been raised, and it then gives him an opportunity to answer it. And he can answer it in a number of ways. He can answer it by saying it is false, I deny it, I didn't do that, that didn't happen. Or he can deny it by taking legal action. He can sue the newspapers in the courts to say this is false, you have libelled me, I want damages. And so there are options, there are remedies available to him to get the picture put right, which he can choose to use or not use. But that if that information weren't made available, what information would you allow about political leaders? Where would you draw the line? Would you require that newspapers, before they had a difficult story about any leader of any party, had to ask that leader if he would confirm or she would confirm that story? Well, they'd all say no, wouldn't they? Any damaging story, you should say, no, that's not true, you can't publish it. And that's why, even if it's wrong, it is right to be free to publish it. I think you ask a harder question. Is it possible, is it right to offend with freedom of speech? And here, I think we need to draw some lines and decide what you mean by offend. And what gets difficult, where the lines get difficult, is at the point at which you say, this is so offensive that it is illegal. So it's very straightforward that if you go around saying, I'm going to kill you, that is illegal. Straightforward threat. If you say, I'm going to hit you, that is illegal. Incitement of violence, if you go around saying, I'm going to ask 100 people to go and burn down the Houses of Parliament, that is illegal. You wouldn't get very far because it's quite well protected, but and that's quite right. Incitement to violence, threats of violence should be illegal. That is not free speech, that is crime. And I don't think those borderlines are too hard to satisfy oneself about. But what if I hold a view that you all greatly dislike? That I ought to be able to put. And frankly, that could be almost anything. And that could be my belief in free markets. If you were a group of ardent Trotskyites, you might find I assume you're not, because I don't normally find, well, I do sometimes actually, a few Trotskyites come on my meetings, but none of you seem to be masked or in that position. You might find the belief in free markets deeply, deeply offensive. But you would have no right to stop me saying it. I might take the view that a defender of the regime in North Korea was saying something deeply offensive. But if the North Korean ambassador wanted to come here and defend North Korea, I think that would be a really interesting debate for you to have, to challenge him on how that country operates. But I do think we should voluntarily conduct debate in an atmosphere of good manners, not by law, but by the sense of it being the best way to develop the argument. And to this extent, I'm not that critical of political correctness. But David Cameron put it very well when he said that a lot of political correctness is just straightforwardly good manners. I'm not going to pick on a member of the audience and think of some rude thing that I could say to that member of the audience, because that would be unfair. But somebody could point to me and call me Four Eyes or something, or Papist, or any of those sorts of things. I wouldn't mind, because I'm in public life, and if you're in public life, you must expect not everybody wants to be polite to you. I didn't say you'd call me gig lamps, which is apparently the abuse used to people wearing glasses when my father was at school, but as that goes back to the 1930s, I think calling people gig lamps has gone slightly out of fashion, even by my standards. But debate ought to be conducted in polite terms, out of our good nature, rather than because it's enforced by law. So if you want to come up here, if you want to preface your question when it comes to questions with a whole string of Anglo-Saxon words, and you know the ones I'm thinking about, I don't think that should be illegal, but I think you, being people of the world, would have the good sense and the good manners not to use them. But what happens when what you say is racially abusive, I think it's perfectly reasonable for that to be illegal. Why? Does that just contradict what I'm saying? No, it doesn't, because that's not a view. That is a personal offence that is so deep and specific that it is something that is right for the law to criminalise. I think when you say something that is generically rude, it actually shows you don't have much of an argument. But when you say something that is specifically rude to an individual about something over which that individual has no control, it is reasonable for the state to say, that's not part of freedom of speech, that's not part of developing any argument, that's not part of democracy and the rule of law. That's just something that upsets and destabilises society, and it is reasonable to ban it. So my restrictions are extremely limited, and they come in when you are doing things that any rational person would consider to be criminal. So incitement to violence, threat of violence, and racial hatred, and the other types of hatred that go along with that. Otherwise, freedom of speech needs to be as complete as possible to allow people to protect democracy, protect the rule of law, and perhaps develop the ideas that we need to ensure that we are well governed. I was going to go on to speak about the views that I hold, particularly why I'm a conservative. In my clock, freedom of speech has become such an interesting topic that I've taken rather too long on freedom of speech, and I don't want to take freedom of speech into freedom to be boring. Maybe I passed that threshold ages ago. So I will just say one thing on what I believe as a conservative, what I think fundamentally differentiates the conservative from the socialist, and why it ties in with free speech, and that is that I believe that people should be free to lead their lives in the way they want them, with the government and politicians removing obstacles to allow them to lead them as far as possible the way they want, rather than telling them which way they ought to lead their lives and guiding them in that direction. And that underpins everything that I believe as a conservative, but it also ties in with a desire to protect freedom of speech. Because what I want is for you to be able to say what you want, for me as a politician to respond, rather than for me as a politician to tell you what you ought to think, expecting you to mirror it back to me. So I happen to think that the greatest protection of freedom of speech is the liberty of the individual, and that needs a political party that will stand up for it. Now, as I believe in freedom of speech, I will take as many questions as I reasonably can before the booking of the room is cancelled or my dinner has been burned. So, do you want to?
Yeah, okay, so we've got about 45.